Report to the cloud. All right. Recording. You have the mouse, Kathy.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Kathy Martin, and we want to welcome you to the Coca-Cola Supplier Development Institute monthly webinar series. It is the first full day of summer, and we are here to heat things up a little bit. We're going to be talking about understanding cybersecurity for small businesses. So put your seatbelts on because we got lots of good information that we're going to share with you today. As with previous webinars, we'll be recording this training. You'll be able to go to our website, which is tccfellows2018.com. in the blog post area to visit the webinar. You'll be able to do this probably by close of business next Monday, and you'll be able to get the recording. The agenda today will have a little bit of a welcome and introductions. We'll talk about the guidelines for today, and then we will run right into a host of information about cybersecurity and how you can protect yourself as a small business. When we finish, we will remind you about providing evaluation and feedback by filling out the evaluation and feedback forms, which are on the website that everybody should already be familiar with. And then we'll wrap it up with any final questions. During the presentation, if you have questions, we've got answers, but we're going to make you write the questions in the chat box. So you'll use the chat box to send a question, and I will be monitoring while our presenter goes through, and I will alert him to the questions, and we will either answer it through the chat or actually on the call, depending upon the nature. So to locate the chat box, just look to the bottom of your screen, and you'll see where the chat box is, right there where that arrow is pointing. Then you type in your message, and it will pop up on my screen that you have typed in a message, and we'll go from there. To mute or not to mute, we are going to mute you through the presentation, but we would ask that everyone mute their phones. If they're on their computers, mute that as well so that we can avoid any feedback during the presentation. So for introductions, again, my name is Kathy Martin. I am the project leader for the Supplier Development Institute for Coca-Cola, and I am the owner of Cafe Martin Solutions, LLC, and I have been working with the Urban League to present the Supplier Development Institute for 2018. For those of you that don't know, we have our business coach, who is Mark Parham. He is the director of the Entrepreneurship Center at the Urban League of Greater Atlanta. And if you hear a little bit of background noise right now, he's the host, so we might be hearing him in the background, but he'll be muting his phone and computer as well. Lastly, on our team, we have our executive coach, Dr. Nicole LaBeach. If you've been working with us with the Fellows Institute up to this point, you're very familiar with her organizational design experience, as she is a consultant and head coach for Volition Enterprises, Inc. So today's presenter, let's move on. Today's presenter is Dr. Ron Booth. Ron is the Vice President of Cybersecurity Solutions, and he has lots of initials behind his name. So let me see with this introduction if I can go through everything that he has. He has his PhD in Information Systems. He is a Certified Information Security Manager. He is a Certified Information Security Management System Lead Implementer. He is a holistic information security practitioner, and he's a licensed instructor. So with all of that knowledge, you can see that Ron has extensive experience with cybersecurity risk management, asset management, vulnerability assessments, physical protection systems, information systems, strategic planning, information security awareness programs, and many, many more. He has a background in auditing information systems as well as with the comprehensive approach to physical and cyber security for fixed sites such as banks and industrial plants, embassies, and corporate offices. And lastly, but not least, he has helped clients become a center of excellence in cybersecurity. He has developed risk assessment and risk treatment methodology for information assets to ensure that potential impacts don't become realized. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ron Booth and let him help you understand the importance of cybersecurity for small businesses. Please welcome Ron.
Well, hello, Kathy. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'd like to start by reminding everyone of some of the recent cybersecurity breaches, and don't worry about all that, all the acronyms behind my initials, or behind my name rather, because I'm going to try to make this understandable and hopefully something that you can walk away with. So there's been major breaches that you may or may not have heard about with Home Depot, Yahoo, Uber, Equifax, Target, JP Morgan, Delta, and these they were all on the news, so hopefully you've seen them and you know what I'm talking about when it comes to things of that nature. So you might be asking yourself immediately, well, how does that apply to me as a small business? Well, I'd like to point you to Delta Airlines, Equifax, and Target as examples. A third-party vendor or supplier was a weak link. In other words, the hackers hacked the third-party supplier and subsequently got into the larger organization and caused a major breach. And these major breaches that have occurred, they're on a very large level in terms of dollar impact and impact to customers. You know, anytime you have to purchase identity fraud insurance for all your customers, that's a major impact, as I'm sure you know. So if you plan on being a supplier, or maybe you already are, to a larger organization, then yes, it does concern you. And also, when you look at it, the average cost of a small business data breach is now around $117,000, and that's to small to medium-sized businesses alone. So the takeaway there is, do you understand the risk that you potentially face with respect to cybersecurity as a small business? What is that risk? And a lot of the hacks for the smaller businesses is not in the news because these types of attacks are just not common knowledge, the way the aforementioned larger organization hacks have been. So trust me, people are hacking smaller businesses. And according to Tim Francis at Travelers, if you are a supplier in a large organization, then the average cost I already mentioned that could happen is $117,000. But according to Tim Francis, small businesses make the assumption that cybersecurity insurance is something that only large organizations need. But if you're a supplier to those large organizations, just imagine what you're going to need if you cause a hack of major proportions like the ones I mentioned to those large companies. They're going to want you to pay for it. So not only can you get cybersecurity insurance, you can also have it very affordable. Okay, so don't be one of those businesses that say, okay, I'm going to underestimate the risk level of my small business, when 82% of businesses alone are saying they're not targets for attack because they don't have anything to worth stealing. And if you have that attitude, you need to ask yourself, well, how do I know that I don't have anything worth stealing? You need to quantify that risk. So ask yourself, how much do you have to lose? Have you ever quantified your risk exposure level? Do you know how much you would lose dollar-wise if you were attacked by a cyber or through a cyber attack? What if your data is stolen or compromised? What if you have a ransomware attack where you can't use your own systems? It can be very devastating. So the takeaway there is to obviously know what your risk is. Do you know whether or not you have any confidential data that's that's governed by national, state, or federal law? Do you know whether or not you're violating any regulations that government regulations, like the consumer privacy and security breach notification laws? Well, if you store social security numbers, addresses, phone numbers of, say, just your employees alone, even if it's only 5 employees, if you get breached, they can steal that information, and then your employees are exposed to identity theft. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. If you have any medical records as a result of having health insurance and having, or through HR, or however you might have those records, if they're on your system, then that is applicable to you. Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. If you keep bank account information and social security numbers, etc., to pay your employees, same difference. You're subject to a federal regulation. When it comes to payment card industry data security standards, that's if you keep credit cards. So if you take credit cards for your business, if you keep a record of credit cards, you're subject to those laws and regulations and standards. So again, you want to know what confidential information you have, and you want to be able to protect it, because the loss of that type of data could be devastating. Not only from lawsuits, that's not all you have to worry about. You have to worry about your image. Will you be able to continue to do business? How much will it cost you to just restore your computers? Those types of things. So again, the first thing you should do is say, okay, I want to reduce my risk. So how do I do that? And one way to do it is to make sure that you follow this little matrix that you see at the top, or this little diagram. It says, okay, when it comes to risk, you have 4 options. You can accept the risk. And that's fine. If you want to accept the risk, you say, okay, I'm a small business. My total business, as far as assets that I keep on the computer and the information, after going through that risk exposure level and honestly asking yourself, you know, if I lose this data or other people's data, how much is that going to cost me? And so you go through what it would take for identity theft, protection for the people whose information you compromise, those types of things. And you just go 1, 2, 3, and you say, okay, I can accept that risk. You know, I got enough revenue that I can set aside X number of dollars, and I already have it set aside, so I'm just going to accept that risk. Another more prudent thing to do is to reduce your risk. How do you reduce your risk? Well, you got to have some sort of cybersecurity checklist, as you see at the bottom there. And in order to comply with some of the HIPAA and payment card industry requirements, you have to follow certain standards. So it's simpler than you think. And I'm going to go through some examples of checklists so you'll understand what I'm talking about more there. But basically, just going through some sort of cybersecurity checklist and say, yeah, I'm protected against this. Yeah, I'm protected against that. Yes, I do this. Yes, I do that. Those types of things. You can avoid the risk altogether if you're not going to use a computer at all that's online. In other words, if you're not using the internet, you don't have an inner office network or anything of that nature, you can just say, I'm not going to get on the internet. That way, my computers are not at risk. They're going to be in-house. I'm going to have physical control over them. And I've taken the proper measures to protect those computers from thieves, vandals, those types of things.
Ron,
and finally, yeah.
Quick question. You talked about complying with HIPAA and high tech. Can you tell us what that is and why that compliance is so important?
Yeah, that was on the previous slide, actually. Let me just go back to that real quick. Okay, you can see the second item there. It's only applicable now with HIPAA if you keep medical information about your employees or your customers for that matter. And that's usually something that HR may or may not have. You may not have those records. If you don't have them, fine, that's nothing to worry about. If you keep credit card data, yeah, you have to worry about. That's the bottom one, payment card industry data security standards. You don't want to compromise your customers' credit cards. It's as simple as that. If you have that type of data, you can see the middle column is the type of data. The third column is what do you actually have. If the answer is none in that record, like for a lot of people, the HIPAA-related information you're not going to have. But if you're a larger organization, you very well may have that type of data, and you have to protect it by law.
Thank you.
That's all I'm saying. Okay? Hopefully I answered the question good. And then, as I mentioned earlier, adopt some sort of accepted information security standard or practice that you can use as a checklist to say, am I following these basic things? And again, I'm going to go through some of these because you need to know what to do. And if not, you don't need to know what your options are as a result. Like if you quantify that risk, which is the most important thing, and you understand what type of data you have, then you'll know at what level you need to protect it. But if you don't quantify that risk, you might not even be able to tell a cybersecurity insurance, if you choose that option, you might not be able to tell that person how much you need to protect. It's like going to the post office with a package and saying, well, I don't know how much it's worth, so just insure it for X number of dollars. And if you insure it for $200, but you find out what's inside really is worth about $200,000, then guess who pays the difference? It's not the insurance. So you want to understand what your business is worth and what you have to pay out of pocket, and then get insurance to cover the things that you can't. Or again, if you quantify it, then the only way you can really do this in a professional sense of the nature is to understand what your risk exposure level is in the first place. So understand that, and then you'll be able to deal with it. Another key aspect of this that you want to consider is that if you don't demonstrate due diligence, then you might have your major suppliers. Say you're working for a major supplier like Coca-Cola, and then they all of a sudden say, hey, I'm going to insist that my third-party suppliers, and your business happens to be one, that they have to be ISO certified. And you'll find that a lot of businesses that have been breached, that's the route they're going, because ISO simply says, okay, you got to go through, you got to have these things done. You got to have virus protection. You got to have policies that require your employees to change their passwords, those types of things. So from that perspective, it might be prudent to make sure you're already doing something, so it won't be such a tall order for you to meet whatever requirements that your major partners or the supplier or the people that you're supplying to may require. So think about that aspect of it as well. Okay, now, this is a checklist. Don't worry about reading everything on here. Just know that these are some of the major breaches that have happened. It shows you the organization. It shows you the type of breach. And if you look closely at that first slide, I had a figure from the Ponemon Institute that showed how much per record that these companies have had to pay out. So the Secretary of State for the state of Georgia, they exposed about 500,000 records, or I'm sorry, 5 million records. So at $225 per record, that's a lot of money that you have to pay out. Okay, so depending on how many records, you need to start looking at those types of numbers. In the far right-hand column that's highlighted in yellow, it shows the items that are called mitigating controls, and they're pretty much just to think of it like what you have to do to protect yourself against those types of things. Do you have, for example, antivirus, anti-malware protection, those types of things? It's a checklist of everything you need. For the larger organizations, in some cases, you have to classify your information. You have to know what data you're storing on this computer. Does it contain confidential information? And you can imagine all the voter registration information for the state of Georgia being contained in one of those databases. That's a lot of sensitive information. So it's as simple as that. Now, the standard that I refer to is the international standard. ISO/IEC, the International Standards Organization, and the International Electrotechnical Commission, that's ISO/IEC. 27001 is the number That's the code. And if you know anything about international standards, they all have a number that they go by. For QA/QC, for example, it's 9001, I believe. For information technology, security, and technique, it's 27001. So you can see on the right hand side, 5.1.1, it tells you that you have to have policies for information security. A set of policies for information security shall be defined and approved by management, published and communicated to employees and relevant external parties. So while you may not be requiring this of your business, a larger organization may be requiring it of you. And a policy can be something as simple as something that you write down no more than a paragraph long that says, hey, no less than every 6 months, you have to change your password, and your password has to be 8 characters or longer. It must contain a capital letter, a smaller case letter, and numbers or a special symbol. Those types of things. And it's just the written version of that. And you could do this. If you're smart enough to open up a business, trust me, you could do all this yourself. The question you have to ask yourself is, do I have the time to do that? And to do it right, more importantly. Because, again, it doesn't take a long time. You know, it just takes diligence and it takes focus to get those types of things done. Okay, now let me simplify cybersecurity by comparing it to, just say, the backyard at your own house. And say this is a picture of your backyard. And you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, what are my vulnerabilities? What am I vulnerable to? You know, and the first thing you can think about, well, burglars, criminals, vandals, you know, I mean, something as simple as a teenager that wants to throw a brick through that window. Or it could be something as sophisticated as a burglar, an experienced burglar. You know, they're going to see those glass windows, and guess what? They're going to say, all I got to do is break a panel of glass, and I'm in, whether they got a deadbolt or not. Or I can just kick the door in. Same with the window. Is it locked or unlocked? The downstairs window. So the first thing you do is identify your vulnerabilities. And then you can say, okay, well, I don't have to worry about the upstairs window. Yes, you do. And it's as simple as this. How could they exploit that? You've already seen that a glass back door could easily be broken into. I told you how and why. A window that's unlocked could be broken into, or they could use, since it's a glass window, the same difference and just break the window and open the latch and they're in. Okay? But if you have ladders laying around in your backyard, say you have somebody painting your house or something like that, and you have that upstairs window open, that's the exploit that they can use. So when you hear me talk about vulnerabilities and exploits, it's really as simple as that. You don't have to make it more complicated. You want to keep things simple. And when somebody's explaining things to you, if it's too complicated for you, ask them to give you an example. How does that apply to me personally? Can you give me an example? I'm giving you that example right now when it comes to vulnerabilities, exploits, and people breaking into your computer. And if you look at it the same way, as far as your computer goes and the protection of your computer, you'll be able to say, okay, the next question is, what can I do? Well, with the backyard, first of all, you can get rid of those glass windows and put solid doors back there. The ladder lying around, you can either chain it up or just not have it in a storage room, a locked storage room, that type of thing. You got to delay a criminal because, you know, when you think about an experienced burglar, they're going to identify quickly the first things they can get in. And if there's a ladder laying around that's not locked up or is available, they're going to take that route. If you have doors and windows locked downstairs and there's an upstairs window open, but by cutting the lights on at night, that's a simple thing you can do because you can see out if you're looking out a window and the lights are not on in your home. And particularly at 2 in the morning, you might be waking up, going to the refrigerator or whatever, and you hear something and then go check it out. You want the outside to be visible and not the inside. And then with a security camera up there in the top left side of that house, you can see it before you move. You just have it in a secure location inside your house. Simple things like that. Other things that you can do, You can add a motion sensor to where if someone does get in your house or they break glass, you know about it. You can have a door sensor. If they kick in your door, you automatically know it. To stop them from kicking in your door, that bar in the far left-hand bottom side is a jab bar. You can buy them at Lowe's for about $20, less than $20 in some cases. And if you live alone, particularly, and you know someone's not going to be coming through your back door, you're not having any barbecues, those types of things, and you don't have to let your dog in and out, you might just want to keep one of those on there, because one of the easiest things that particularly the teenagers do that break into neighborhood homes, they go and they just kick in the door. And if you've seen any good action movie where the police are involved and they need to get somebody's house, they're going to kick the door in or use their shoulder. I mean, it's a simple technique, very effective. You just break through whatever lock they have, whether it's a deadbolt or not. You can just kick through it. With that bar on there, they'll break their leg trying to kick it in. And then there are a host of other things. Again, if you want to delay a burglar, you know, they got to get over your fence first. And then if you have motion detection lights that cover the area inside the fence, well, you know somebody's inside the fence. Or if you have a dog running around inside the fence, you know, you can make it as secure as you reasonably can and what you can afford for any types of threats you face. Another way to look at it is if you protect against an experienced burglar, then the common criminal that's an opportunist more than anything else, they see an easy way to get in. If you're protecting against an experienced burglar, a common criminal is not going to have a chance against stuff like this without getting caught, because there's another element that you can't see, and that's response time. Response time is one of two things. It's how quickly you can go and respond with your dog, with a weapon of some sort to protect yourself. And don't forget, most people that break in your house, especially if they have a drug problem, they're going to hurt you, and they're going to use whatever they can. So you need to arm yourself accordingly, because even if you stop them or you see them coming over the fence, you probably got about 5 minutes before they figure out a way to get in. So know the response time of your local police department to your door. You know, so how quickly can they get there? And if it's more than 5 minutes, I assure you, you're going to need some sort of weapon, because they can scale that fence and get in your door that quickly if they're experienced. And even a crazy person, depending on your vulnerabilities, can get in there. So that's looking at it from a home perspective. And then when you think about it, and I just want to, I keep talking about vulnerability. So this is the technical definition, and I want you to read through that real quick. I'm not going to read it to you, so you understand what a vulnerability is, but hopefully that example kind of gave you and I a good idea. Okay, and then on the converse, you see that last sentence: to exploit a vulnerability, an attacker must have at least one applicable tool or technique that they can connect to a system. Think about it the same way I talked about. Well, if they're going to get in your upper window, they have to have something to exploit it with, like a ladder. You got to take away those ladders and those vulnerabilities, like open doors and windows, those types of things, and take away thereby their exploits. And I'm going to show you what some of those are. Here's a few. You can read through that one too. Malware is a common technique. It's just basically malicious software. And there's a host of others as well. And I'm going to go through some of them, and hopefully you'll get a PDF copy of these slides so you can look them up, or I can send you something. My email will be on the last slide, or you can get it from Kathy or Mark if you just want to know more about that particular item, or a list of places where you can get them from. Now, again, comparing home security to cybersecurity, you're looking at, on the left column, home security vulnerabilities, and on the right, the types of computer vulnerabilities. And I just kind of did a loose comparison so that you can get an idea if you don't already know it. Your open doors and windows, The equivalent to that on the computer end, you know, when you get those updates, if you have a Windows computer and you see those updates from Microsoft, well, if you don't do those updates, guess what? Every time that Microsoft discovers a different vulnerability in their operating system, some way that these hackers can get in, they fix it. And they're pretty good about it too, and that's why they send you updates. If you leave those open, it's just like leaving the doors and windows open at your home. If you live in a real safe neighborhood, you probably won't even experience anybody breaking into your house or going in without knocking or doing what they're supposed to do, unless you know them and you know they're coming in anyway. So think about it from that perspective. An in-the-home security briefing, you know, really prudent people, you know, they tell their families, hey, if there's a fire, here's what we're going to do. They tell them, some people go as far as having fire drills, you know, just knowing what to do should something like that come up. If you have babysitters coming in and out of your home, or if you're fortunate enough to have someone help you to do cleanup, like a cleaning service, and you give them keys, you tell them what they can't do, you give them a code in some cases, those types of things. Well, that prevents social engineering. What would that person do at your house if someone rang the doorbell and then someone was trying to come in, like the utility company? And that's a favor to some criminals to get access into somebody's house. That's called social engineering. People can do the same thing with computers. Call you up, say, hey, I'm from your IT department. And you may or may not have experienced one of those calls where somebody calls up from India and they say, hey, I need access to your computer because we're getting a lot of viruses and stuff like that coming from your computer. Don't play that game. You know, I mean, anytime someone's trying to trick you over the phone, you have to know the likelihood of somebody calling you up and telling you. If it's your IT department, just say, look, I'm in the middle of something right now. You don't have to be rude. I'm in the middle of something right now. Can I call you right back? Give me your number. I'll call you right back. Then you look them up. Then you call your own IT department and say, hey, you got somebody that needs my password? Don't call the number they gave you. Call the IT department. Plus, the number you should recognize, but then there's a lot of spoofing going on. So people can have numbers that look just like yours and call you up, as some of you may experience. It's already happened a lot of times. If you leave an open garage, that, you know, that's the same difference on a computer as saying, okay, I'm going to leave my system logged into the HR payroll system. I'm going to leave it logged into, you know, anything that's sensitive. You know, my employee data, you know, databases that contain employee reviews, whatever. And it doesn't matter if you're small or large. You have some information that's probably confidential, and you may or may not have thought about it. Too many people having your alarm code or the key to your house is a home vulnerability. These cleaning services I told you about, or anybody else that you give a key to, including your kids, because sometimes your kids may not be as savvy as you are, and somebody might be asking a lot of questions about your house. They may come and visit their friends. I've met people who have had their homes broken into, and the people that are broken into are friends of their kids. So, you know, you got to tell them what to do and what not to do. As well as, you know, when someone leaves that no longer needs that alarm code, change that code, eliminate it from your system. That's the same difference as having weak or shared passwords, or even default passwords. When you get new computer software, usually has a default password. You want to change that to something that only you know, or only the people that you want to know. That's like changing the locks on your door when you move into a new home. You don't want to trust the people that had the home before, or the apartment would have you. And again, like leaving the upstairs window open. I talked about the vulnerability of doing that, as well as the exploit. Well, when you look at these types of sophisticated computer vulnerabilities, in some cases, they're also exploits. You know, just like an open door is a vulnerability, but it's also the exploit that people walk through the door with. That's how malicious software works. Phishing techniques, malware, I'm going to show you a slide on that, so I'll leave that out for now. Phishing, that's when you get those emails promising you something, threatening you, or something of that nature. And if you click on what's in there, guess what? You could be letting a Trojan horse in, which is some sort of spyware or adware or anything that a hacker wants to use to get access to your computer or your sensitive information. Same with spam. And adware is it's as simple as those irritating ads you get. You click on something, next thing you know, when you log into Facebook, you're seeing the same stuff you looked at when you went shopping at Amazon, you know, those types of things. Spam, that's just getting a bunch of emails that you don't like. Not necessarily phishing, because they're not always malicious. They're just the same as adware, except for they come in the form of emails. Now, then there's also spear phishing. If you're a very important person, like the owner of a small business that someone wants, like say your competitor, and they want to know stuff about you, then if they know enough about you already, they can target you, and they have enough information like, you know, who your spouse is, those types of things that they can use to try to guess passwords, and a bunch of other ways they can use it against you. So hopefully that made some sense to you. Now, you know, again, with exploits, they can be, in some cases, a vulnerability. Open doors, windows, garages, just guessing passwords, using a crowbar. You know, if you have a door, even if you have a door, they can use a crowbar and just pry their way in, or brute force. The computer equivalent is brute force attacks. Now, SQL Server injections and cross-site scripting, they may not be in your everyday vocabulary, so I'll explain them briefly. But, you know, you can do something as simple as do a Google search and put in SQL injection, and it'll explain to you everything that you want to know about SQL injection. And basically, it's just simply someone using a line of code to break into your computer. You know, at the username and password prompt is where you would put an SQL injection. And if you don't have that type of code running in the background, particularly if you have some sort of database or website, that's where that's used at, mostly on websites. Same with cross-site scripting. And so they'll put that injection in there, and they'll say, well, 105 equals where 1 equals 1. So in other words, if the username that you put in equals the username that they have in their database, then boom, guess what? Well, if you have a scripted code that's doing the same thing that the computer's doing and it's talking to the computer, it's reading that line of code instead of the username, and it's saying, oh, this is okay. And then what happens next is a list of all your usernames pops up on their screen. Cross-site scripting, it's just where, and it's also termed XSS, cross-site scripting. It's where malicious code is put on the original website at the database level or at a victim's request. So a victim might be requesting something, and then the code that's malicious is just fooling what the computer is seeing. It's another form of an injection, but just different in the nature of how you categorize it as far as a computer exploit goes. Brute force password attacks, that's very simple. That's where they're just taking a dictionary and they're trying every dictionary word as the password. And there's programs that do this. And if you've never heard of a script kiddie, that's programs that a 10-year-old can use to break into a computer. And if you don't have some of the protections that I'm talking about, these script kiddies, which are just malicious code that are written that people can attack your computer with. Spoofing, when you get one of those emails that say, okay, this is Bank of America, your account has been compromised, you have to log in right now. Those types of things are spoofing. Just as well as someone cloaking their phone number and calling you up trying to, when you actually pick up the phone, you think it's somebody that's close to you because they have the same first 6 digits as your number, and you say, okay, I'm going to answer the phone. That's how they spoof you, and then next thing you know, you're getting solicited for a cruise. TMI on phone calls. If you or someone in your household gives out too much information, the social engineers are going to use that to exploit and find out a way to get in your house. You know, usually kids will do this sometimes inadvertently if you haven't briefed them. Social engineering, I already explained that on the computer end, people pretending to be somebody they're not, trying to get access to your computer. Malware is simply software designed to let a hacker gain control over your computer or your device. And it's usually installed by a virus or by connecting to a network that's infected. Like when you go to the airport and you connect to the local Wi-Fi connection, or if you go to Starbucks or anywhere and you connect to Wi-Fi and you're not using a VPN or a virtual private network, which allows you to just bypass that because it's encrypted, then you're subject to the malware attack using local or free Wi-Fi. And it may act like a virus, but it's probably going to corrupt or erase your files in some cases. And in some cases, like ransomware, it's going to encrypt your files so you can't see what's on your computer. So even if you only have one computer, imagine if you get a ransomware attack and you can't use anything on your computer. What do? And I'll show you some of the things that you can do. Okay, so there's a list of other cyber attacks. I showed you malware, and in the interest of time, I'm just going to start moving through quickly. And you have advanced persistent threats. You have distributed denial of service attacks. So if you have a website and somebody attacks you with a denial of service, and don't forget, this is something as simple as a script kiddie. It's just sending a bunch of information to your computer to keep it so busy that you or your customers can't use your website. The insider attack, one of the most brutal type of attacks, because it's someone that's inside your business that probably knows everything about it, and they decide to become disgruntled and just attack you for whatever reason. Even someone like a very close partner, and you just have a falling out, and they say, okay, well, if you're not going to do it my way, then I'm going to destroy the business. Again, a very brutal attack. If you ask yourself, well, what's the best way to protect against that? Well, there's only a couple of ways. Have a data backup, that's kept off-site. And when I say off-site, I'm talking about 10 miles or more away, because you could have something simple happen, like a fire at your business where your computers burn up. And if you don't have, you might be able to replace the computers easy through insurance or what have you. But if you don't have a backup tape, then the computers, they're going to need that information back, and you got to get it from somewhere. And if you don't have a backup, then, guess what? You got to manually type it in or get it back in on your computer somehow. Phishing, ransomware, I already mentioned those. And then zero-day attacks. Now, they're very lethal. A lot of people are afraid of this because it's where, remember when I mentioned that someone like a Microsoft would send regular updates to your computer as soon as they identify vulnerabilities? Well, a zero-day attack is when a hacker figures out a vulnerability that Microsoft or some other computer vendor has not, and they use that to exploit your computer. They're lethal because there's no protection against them. But 90% of the time, or more like 95% of the time, you're not going to experience those types of attacks. And as soon as they're identified, like some of these different viruses, like malware protection, or malware attacks, some of them are new. Ransomware was new not too long ago, and when it was new, then no one knew how to protect against it because it started out as a zero-day attack. This is new, getting on someone's computer, encrypting the data and holding it ransom. But it's still used, and if you don't have that protection, if you haven't patched for it, then there you go. You're subject again. Cybersecurity insurance. I already talked about that and why you need it. And you need to be asking yourself, do I need it? And it's as simple as just going through and asking yourself those types of things. Another thing is having yourself and your employees just be vigilant, And what I mean by that, a simple policy. Say you only have 5 employees. You could do that. Your policy can be word of mouth. You don't want to let people in. So, you don't open the door unless you know who it is, identify them. If you are going to let them in, they have to sign in. If you have a security camera that's recording everyone that enters the front door of your business, there's a bunch of different things you can do to protect yourself. You want to be able to find someone if they do break in, and if you're friendly enough and those things sound uncomfortable, just make sure you can keep some sort of record. Asking someone to sign in before they have access to your business, That's not asking too much of anyone. Most people will sign in, but you want to know who they are. The more critical your data, the more you want to ask them. You know, well, show me some ID. You know, give me a driver's license, something. You know, those types of things are easy to do. Okay, so hopefully you're really asking yourself, what should I do about cybersecurity? Well, you got to really think. Again, you want to educate your employees. There's a list over there on the left-hand column. Some of the ones I've already talked about. And I'm not going to recommend any specific malware and antivirus programs out there. I can tell you a few not to get, but at the same time, some of the ones that you want to get them from a reputable company. McAfee. Hitman Pro is a really good malware protection software. It scans your computer every time you reboot it. You can scan it anytime you get ready, and it looks for malware, and then it also does real-time scanning, just like McAfee, but McAfee is only looking for viruses. And in some cases, it has a firewall. It's real good when you're surfing the web, a whole host of things. So just having those two alone is something, and doing your regular update, like I mentioned, is good. Educating your employees, having some sort of information security awareness training, and just say, hey, you know, we're going to dedicate 30 minutes to making sure that everybody understands you have to change your passwords, you have to do X, Y, and Z when it comes to cybersecurity. And don't forget, right along with cybersecurity is physical security, because someone can walk in your front door, pick up that computer, and walk out the door with it. And guess what? Same damage. Even more so, because they have the whole computer. So you'd have to buy the computer too. Again, having policies and procedures. A disaster recovery plan. Well, what are you really going to do if your business catches on fire? Understand that. Business continuity. How do you continue to do business when there's an emergency going on? You know, depending on where you are, you might be more subjected to a tornado hitting. Everyone pretty much is subjected to some sort of fire, or some collateral damage from a fire from the business next door, those types of things. So just what are you going to do? And write them down and make sure everyone understands, here's what we're going to do. You know, everyone will work from home. You can give them laptops, so you can require them to have a computer at home, and you make sure that they're able to have access to what they would have access to at work, those types of things. Again, backups off-site. Quantify your risk, probably one of the most important things, and participate each year. There's a bunch of free information available, including cybersecurity activities in October. October is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and all you have to do is just do a Google search for that. You'll find all the information you need, and just participate in that, or at least download some of the free information and understand it. Have some sort of central IT person, a go-to person that people go to when their computer has a problem. And that would also be the person that administers the policies for you. That person could be yourself if you know enough and you have the time to do it. And plus, if the boss is the IT person, people aren't going to come to you and say, hey, I installed something I shouldn't have, and now my computer's not working. They'll be very hesitant. So, you know, there's some pros and cons there. Plus, it'll keep you a little bit more busy than you probably like. But in any event, just a central person they go to for IT related problems. And a cybersecurity consultant of some sort, or some sort of service that you use to seek advice about cybersecurity. And again, have insurance. Now, this next slide, it shows Bill Mason, a quote from him. He's a master jewel thief. He even wrote a book. And he, you know, the basic takeaway there is that you can have the most sophisticated systems in the world when it comes to security, but people that have cheap combination locks, and they have risk-aware and risk-averse people that are vigilant, that work for them, it can be better, because when people have spent all that money on security, they say, well, you know, I get a false sense of security. And I'm saying don't do that, because your employees can be either the weakest link, or you can make them your biggest defense. It's as simple as that. And I hear some background. Yeah, go ahead.
got a question 2 slides back when you talked about having a cybersecurity consultant available. So I'm assuming that that cybersecurity consultant would be somebody like yourself, but that would come into my small business. I have 3 employees. We all have computers. We're all connected. You would come in and do that risk assessment and then tell me how vulnerable my systems are. Is that what you mean by having that consultant available?
That's one aspect of it. Just someone that's a go-to person. Like if you don't know your risk and your risk exposure level, somebody that could just walk you through something that'll help you quantify that risk. Someone that you can go to and that'll tell you, well, you know, you need this, that, or the other. This kind of software, that kind of software, as far as protecting yourself against viruses, malware. Just, you know, a readily available person. It could be just a very knowledgeable IT person could tell you about some of the latest, greatest things that you can do, or just someone that's in the business of being a cybersecurity consultant like myself.
So the next step after getting that assessment then would be to follow through and put all those things in place that are recommended, and then having an assessor come back after you've done that to see if there's any change in the level of risk.
Exactly. Because they can come in and do the assessment at one cost, and then you say, okay, can you come back and do a follow-up assessment? Because I'm going to take the report that you gave me, I'm going to do everything I can, and then they can tell you what your risk exposure is after you've done those things. That's exactly right, and that's a good point. Plus, I want to give you another thing. You know, I've consulted with a lot of large organizations, and I'm not going to name any names for obvious reasons, but when you see them on the TV being hacked, and you know that you've told them all these things and they just didn't do it, well, it kind of hurts you personally, you know, or at least it hurts me. So, you know, just don't be one of those people. And that's my actual last slide. Hopefully you heard what I said about just having your employees be vigilant. But would you rather ask questions like, and I'm not sure who asked that question, Kathy, but you know, those are the types of questions that you want to ask up front. How do I prepare for a cyber attack? And that quote from John F. Kennedy is very applicable. You know, you don't want to try to get things fixed when you're under attack. It's too late. You know, the damage is probably already done. You want to do it when the sun's shining, everything's already good, and you just want to keep them that way. So you ask those questions, and then you do your due diligence, and you take care of them up front. And you don't want to have the other conversation. What happened and why were we breached? You know, it's as simple as that. So with that, I'll answer any more questions, Kathy. That's really all I had. And well, one more thing, your cybersecurity solutions don't have to be expensive, but you do need to do something. Don't just beat yourself.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's very important, Ron, because I think it's about the ounce of prevention is greater than a pound of cure. So I think those closing remarks are very, very important. Appreciate you sharing all that information. I think having the analogy between the house and our companies made it very easy for us to understand how the vulnerabilities how the vulnerabilities exist, things that we don't think about, things that we can see, things that we can't see. So that analogy was certainly well worth it. And I appreciate you providing that information. So this last screen, there's some questions. If you have questions, you'll see that Ron has provided an email for you. And it's ron.booth@turnkeysolution.biz, B-I-Z. So if you want to get in touch with Ron after hearing this information, feel free to do so. Ron is an outside consultant, and we have brought him in to do this presentation. So anything that he does beyond there will be something that you would work out with him. So we want to thank Ron for providing us with a great presentation. And I also want to remind everybody in closing remarks that we have another webinar scheduled a month from now, It's scheduled for July the 19th, and currently the topic is project and time management. Again, we have webinars every third Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We want to make sure that you go to the TCC Fellows 2018 website and complete your feedback and evaluation form. Let us know that you understood about the risk from confidentiality, integrity, and availability, that you understand the difference between vulnerabilities and exploits, and that you recognize the need to prepare for that attack that you hope will never come. So thank you very much for participating in our webinar. We look forward to seeing you in the future.